You are listening to the Pencil and Paper Podcast Network.
You're listening to the Horror Ramblings Podcast, the show about all things horror. We hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome to the House of Horror, or whatever you guys want to call it. It is the Horror Ramblings Podcast. Steven's not with me right at the moment, but we have a nice little surprise for you guys. It's been a little while since you've seen her on the show, heard her on the show, whatever you guys want to say. It's my wife, Samantha. What's up, honey? Yes, the ferrets are in the background. They all hear it all the time. She's over here laughing. She didn't want to do this, but oh well. How are you?
Tired.
Tired. We're expecting a baby, so the missus is growing a little human inside of her, so that means I got laid. Well, you know. So, you're not big into horror, obviously, as we've talked about before, and as I've talked about on the show multiple times. But you do like some things. So I thought we would talk about something that's been around since 2011. I just looked it up. And something that we've both watched. We've kind of missed a little bit of, but honestly, I think the best seasons are probably the earlier seasons. We're going to talk about good old American Horror Story. One of my favorite shows, at least the early seasons. So I thought we'd just kind of start real quick by discussing what season you would say is your favorite, and then I would say what season's my favorite. We'll kind of talk about that a little bit. And then we'll talk about the seasons that we just did not care for. So what season would you say would be your favorite season of American Horror Story?
Freak Show.
I had a feeling, and I know it's mainly because of good old Twisty, because you're obsessed with Twisty. But hey, John Carroll Lynch is a nice guy. He's fantastic. And we just talked about on one of the last episodes the movie Freaks, which actually inspired Freak Show. But why do you like Freak Show so much? Let's get into that real quick.
It's been a very long time since I have watched it. So I don't know. I guess it's one of the seasons that stands out to me the most because while, yes, Twisty is my favorite bad guy from American Horror Story, they gave him a great backstory that you could relate to, even though he was this villain who was kidnapping children and and, killing people. But he had a great background that you learned about more as you watched, which was one of my favorite aspects.
That's fair. It's fair. I bet you could probably guess what season is my favorite. Any ideas?
Murder House.
No, actually. Take one more guess. I'll give you one more.
It better not be Asylum.
No, but Asylum is slept on. I'm going to get into that one. Season 3.
Yeah.
Coven just really brought everything over the top. The witches were awesome, and let's be honest, Jessica Lange.
No, you also like what?
Stevie Nicks,
yes.
Who's in it, yes. But, Jessica Lange, come on. That lady is just, yeah. But I don't know, something about season 3, the way that they told the stories of the characters, and the characters that they created they were broken, they were evil. It was a nice mix of all of these different characters, and they're all extremely powerful, but at the same time, it shows that even people with great powers can be horrible human beings. Just had an interesting balance to me, and they didn't overdo the gore and everything, which I appreciate that. But honestly, I don't know, out of all of the seasons, Coven's just been the one that's kind of stuck with me the most. As far as like seasons that I cannot stand, though, was not a fan of Roanoke. Okay.
Coven is one of my favorite seasons. However, I felt like, I don't know how appropriate I say this, but it was like a bunch of girls contest to determine who would be the next, I don't even remember what called
Supreme?
Her. Yes. And so that kind of why it thrown off for me. They were all just trying to kill each other, become the Supreme Witch that was able to rule.
Yeah, but it's always entertaining when women decide to have a dick measuring contest. I mean, there's something funny about that. And I love Jessica Lange in general. I think she's awesome. But to see her in that role and want to hold on to her power, that's what I found really entertaining about it. Plus, I really liked the Axeman. He was one of the better written characters, and based off of a true, sort of story that happened there in New Orleans. They never found the real Axeman. He really did go and murder a bunch of people, and then he just disappeared. And I love how they tied that in. I also love how Kathy Bates was just so freaking evil. And let's be honest, she was racist, but when she became friends with Queenie and everything sort of got good between them, she learned. She still got punished in the end. I mean, it was one of the more successful seasons. They even wanted to do a spin-off of it, which is just mind-blowing. But I don't know. I guess I see where you're coming from. It is kind of, just a dick measuring contest when it comes to the end of it. I mean, really is what it is. But I don't know. There's something about that season just still sticks with me. Roanoke, though, it was good when it started.
There was nothing wrong with Roanoke besides that they went 3 episodes long too.
Yeah.
If they had stopped where they should have stopped where the story was finished and whatnot, then it would have been fine. As a season, I wouldn't have probably rewatched it, but I would have, enjoyed it a little bit more than when they went 3 more episodes.
Yeah, that was my thing. Like, when I really thought it was going to be done, I was happy. I was like, it's not a bad season. But then they were like, oh yeah, there's a few more episodes. I'm like, really? Like, we're getting into more episodes already? And it kind of spoiled the rest of it for me, just seeing that,
Well, and it's one of the shorter seasons that there is. And it's, when American Horror Story started, they were all longer seasons. So many different stories that could help elongate the season, but that one didn't really have a lot of intertwining story like the rest.
Yeah, and I feel like with the other seasons, they do pull a lot out of reality. They pull a lot of different legends and stories out of reality. And the real Roanoke is such a mystery. I think they kind of just decided to play around with it a little bit, and then at the end of it, I think they just sort of ran out of ideas and they just went, screw it, let's just roll with what we've got. I mean, a weak season for me, not the best season. Is it watchable? Yes, but is it my favorite? No. What season would you say you just could not get behind other than Roanoke? And if you say Asylum, I will slap the shit out of you.
I hate that season.
It's like my favorite season. I really won't slap my wife, everybody.
Asylum was very boring, and I felt like it was not as creative as they could have been in an insane asylum setting. There was so much more that they could have done. But no, I would say, I can't remember which one we watched and haven't, but I stopped watching either Apocalypse or Cult because it was just to the point of ridiculousness, and I wasn't willing to even season. And I can't remember which one it was. I remember there was an election in one of those seasons, whichever one, and
I think that's Cult.
I could not finish watching that one. It, to me, it was not a very good season, and that would have to be my least favorite season since I couldn't even make it through watching it fully.
See, I wasn't a big fan of 1984 either. Like, it was hit or miss.
It was not a bad season.
Yeah.
But it's that kind of venue or situation is overdone in horror movies all around the world. And so to do it, you have to put a different spin on it, and that's not what they did. It was just a murderer going to camp.
Well, they did end up putting a decent twist on it at the end where everybody was dead, and it was basically like hell for them.
We never finished.
I know, but I do my reading even when I decide not to finish things. So, I don't know.
Everybody always dies.
I just think 1984 was, like I said, it hit or miss for me. But, I mean, it feels like the last few seasons have been kind of drawn out, and they've started to kind of run out of that creative spark that they had. I know a lot of people were nervous when Hotel came out because it was the first season without Jessica Lange.
Lady Gaga.
And I know you really enjoyed Hotel. I didn't think Hotel was too bad, actually. I thought it was a fresh new take, and I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that they had Lady Gaga come on and be a part of it.
Well, and I think that out of all of the seasons, now granted, I've not watched like 12 of them, that Hotel was definitely the most gruesome, bloody, and just killing for no reason season. That rhymed. But it was good for what it was. It wasn't meant to be taken too seriously, so all of the blood and the gore added to that. Plus that was one of the last seasons where they had multiple different stories coming in at once. You had the murderers who would meet at the hotel once a year, and they would do whatever they would do. I don't remember exactly. Then you had Lady Gaga, who was a vampire who was kidnapping children and turning them into vampires. And then you had, like, the other ghosts that would haunt the hotel and that would once you died on grounds, you stayed, and they would haunt it, and you got to see some of their different stories. So to me, that season was more of a collaborative effort than it was like the rest of the seasons have been one main storyline, and then you have some that branch off.
Well, and I think, too, the reason that Hotel sort of holds a certain place in people's minds is it's the first season, like I said, it is one of the first seasons without Jessica Lange in it.
Lady Gaga.
But with that switch...
She's amazing.
Will you let me finish, lady? Yes, she is amazing, but switching from what they were doing with the cast up to that point, we get a new leading lady in a sense, and so they really upped the ante. They changed it, so not only are we losing Jessica Lange and gaining Lady Gaga, we're also getting a much more gruesome story, because yes, the films were gruesome to a degree, but then we get to the point where we're at in Hotel, and it just makes a big shift. Now, I'm going to bring this up again, because I will defend this. I think Asylum did an amazing job at telling its stories. I think it told a lot of different stories. And let's be honest, they gave us a killer Santa Claus. And that was just amazing. That entire scene, if anything, to me, that is one thing from that season that I thought was spectacular that they didn't do in any other season.
Put crazy people together, or an asylum. They will.
Yes, well, Asylum is the season that I think gets slept on.
I will not watch it.
I think it's great. It is a slow burn, I think. I think that's why you don't like it, because it's not getting where it starts to really pick up. But I mean, come on, a nun possessed by the devil, a serial killer who's at the asylum, who's posing as, you know, a psychologist, posing as a media person or whatever to try to help someone, but he's really obsessed with her. I mean, aliens, it's all over the place, but it all...
That's the problem.
But it all comes together at the end so well. I think it does, personally.
It doesn't.
Maybe not to you, but maybe that should be a question. Maybe we should find out if people like Asylum or not. Now, is there a season that you think kind of gets slept on? Anyone that comes to mind?
I don't know. I don't think so. I'm not a fan of a lot of the seasons. I still watch them, but we've had this discussion before, and I'm not a huge fan of Murder House either. And we have rewatched it like 6,000 times. But I'm not a huge fan of Murder House. It's definitely not one of my bottom, but it's kind of like sits in the middle. I do like Coven with the discrepancies that I've already talked about, but without watching all of them, I don't know. I don't think.
Yeah, I think Freak Show is the one that really holds in your mind the most. Like you said, it's more of your favorite season, and I know you'd probably like to see Twisty again.
He could have his own.
I could see that. That would be pretty interesting.
John Carroll Lynch.
Yeah, we got to meet him. He was awesome. Got to meet a lot of the cast from American Horror Story, actually. Yeah, I'm terrible at names.
We met two from the season of Freak Show. And I believe Amazon Eve may be what she's referred to. But we've met her and John Carroll Lynch. And he was very sweet and caring. And, you know, he didn't get a lot of attention at these conventions because he's not real well known for his horror movies. And so it was nice to be able to have like a one-on-one conversation with him, unlike when we did meet Robert Englund, and he was great to talk to, but you couldn't spend as much time talking to him as you could like John Carroll Lynch, who is less known for his horror movies.
Yeah, and who
even though he hates them.
Yeah, isn't a big fan of the horror stuff. He was also on I believe it's called Channel Zero. It was a show on Shudder, and he was in one of the seasons of that, and the season of that he was in, he was really good. And I don't know, they should hire him to do more horror stuff, because he was also in 1984. He was in that season.
The murderer.
Yeah, he was the killer in that, and I thought he did a really decent job in that. But I don't know, I'm going to keep my eye out. I know the last couple seasons that I've seen trailers for and everything, I just haven't been as into it, and maybe it's just that I need to step back and take the time and actually watch them and give them a chance. I mean, a lot of it is we just don't have as much time to watch that stuff as we used to. But at the same time, it's like there's like a magic missing from the original seasons, I think. But all good things have to come to an end. So I guess I understand sometimes you can only tell so many stories.
Well, and it's American Horror Story, but there's also American Horror Stories, which is like a different
It's like an anthology series.
Take on what it is. But I also don't think of this series as horror movie genre series. It's called horror stories, but I don't see them being as scary, and I think they're more suspense than horror movies and horror TV shows. So I don't know if this necessarily qualifies in the horror category just because horror story.
It's sexual, it's got violence and monsters, it's horror enough, and it might freak some people out, but as long as women get to drool over Evan Peters, I guess, you know.
Though he is another one that does not like scary movies. He does these things, and so he did have to take a season off because it became too much for him to portray these characters.
Yeah. That's one thing I love about American Horror Story. If you look at the behind-the-scenes stuff, there's a lot of really funny, like, behind-the-scenes and really interesting behind-the-scenes stuff. It's like they got Jessica Lange to come back for Apocalypse to play the character that she played in Murder House. And that's the whole reason that she came back to do it. She becomes attached to certain characters that she's played. And when they told her about that, and, you know, that they wanted her to be that same character, to be Constance in Apocalypse.
It took you.
Yeah, it did take me a minute. But she was completely down for it because she loved the character. My favorite story, though, is Kathy Bates. They called her for Coven, and they said, we want you to play a character that's even more evil than the character that you played in Misery. She said yes instantly because apparently Kathy Bates loves playing evil characters. And I love seeing her in American Horror Story. I think she really steals the show when she's in it. So
that's the one thing that American Horror Story does, is they keep the kind of the similar cast so that you can see them portray different kinds of characters. They're not always the good ones or the people.
True, very true. Now, this episode's going to be a real short one, but sort of before we kind of close out, what would you like to see from another season of American Horror Story? Is there any, like, particular sort of direction you'd want to see it go? Maybe it tell a different kind of story, or...
I think the problem with the way American Horror Story works now is that it goes too much for the generic, stereotypical things that you see in every kind of type of horror movie. But, like, they started going to more generic things you would see in every horror movie, but Freak Show was not one that you would see in a typical scary movie. Freak Show is something that they've created, and, you know, I don't know as much as he does, so he may tell me I'm wrong. But I think that's why that season stands out the most, because it wasn't done before. So I think if American Horror Story plans to stick around for any substantial amount of time, they're going to have to get more creative with.
The only thing that I will touch on about what you just said, yes, this Freak Show was a fairly original season, but they did take some inspiration from a film from the 1930s called Freaks. And that's one of those movies that if the people listening have not seen it, they need to see it. At the time when it came out, it was really controversial, and Freak Show really does bring up a lot of the same subjects. But I can see why people like Freak Show so much for that reason. I know if I turn on the TV and see that they're doing anything that involves like a church or maybe a community where weird things are happening, I think that's what they should do, get more into telling an overall story. Maybe not as much as they did in Asylum, since you're shitting on Asylum here, but if they can connect the stories like they did in the earlier seasons, I think that's what's going to pay off. You know, don't just tell a story about, oh, there's this many monsters in this town, or there's all these evil people in this hotel, or this or that, or, you know, actually give it all a connection, because if they can make it all connect, that's what works. Hotel, everything ended up sort of connecting in a way. Murder House, things connected in a way. You're going to shit on it again, but Asylum, everything connects at the end. You know, they use simple tropes sometimes, and that fails them. But I think if they did try to use a simple trope, then tell a simple story, and it'll end up good. It's the problem with Roanoke. It was a simple story, they just tried to draw it out too long.
I feel like the episodes were also possibly longer, and that's...
I feel like you're right. I feel like they were a little bit longer.
And so maybe that's why they ran out of topics to discuss. But when talking about the community thing, another kind of horror movie TV show that we started to watch and never finished was that show From that was on.
I'd have to
we
look
watched
what
it at our
network it's on.
friend's house, and it definitely was a different take. Again, he's going to tell me I'm wrong. That I've not seen in horror movies of a town where if you drove into it, you were stuck, and then these, whatever they were, came and kind of impersonated people that you know, but they were slightly different to kill people. And if you were in your house, then you were fine. But if you were outside of your house, you were dead.
Or if you let them in,
Like the little girl did.
Yeah, they got torn to shreds. Yeah. No, I think it's just one of those things where American Horror Story may have reached its full potential at this point in time, and it might have to go away for a while and maybe come back. I think that's why they did the American Horror Stories, because they're trying to tell a different story each time to see if that kind of refreshes it. But doing that even makes me feel like they're just trying to imitate things that have already been around. To me, it screams they're trying to rip off Tales from the Crypt to a degree,
He's a fun guy.
Yes, definitely. But I don't really have anything else.
I just want to say that American Horror Story used to be a little bit more enticing when they would let the audience. I follow the director. I don't know, his name's Ryan.
Ryan Murphy.
Yeah. When he would take more inspiration from what his audience wanted. So he would do polls and give you two of the ideas they were looking at, and you would vote to see which one it really was about. And he already had picked, it was more of entertaining for the audience. But when he would do that, you would be drawn into the trailers that they were doing for it, and it would give little hints and guess what it was, like what monster was going to be. And that made it a little bit more enticing. And now it's just like they tried doing 2 seasons a year, which was, I don't know if it was as successful as they expected it to be. But, it's not as captivating because you aren't as interactive as an audience with it now than the way American Horror Story.
They also used to do a lot more marketing. They used to tease a lot more. They used to engage with people, just as you were saying. They used to engage with people on multiple levels, at polls and things like that, like you were saying. But they also used to do a lot of really fun teasers and all kinds of things. But I think if they got back to the basics and maybe even revisited some other things, I would love to see them revisit Asylum, but maybe years down the road.
Do it better.
At the end of that season, the asylum was no longer open or anything, but it would be interesting to see people go back and maybe rebuild. Maybe something else is happening there, and then, in horror fashion, things go crazy, and next thing you know, there's people dying, there's curses being put on people, all kinds of stuff. I mean, there's all sorts of possibilities, but I don't know. I think a more American Horror Story may surprise us, but at the same time, maybe it's time to put it on the back burner for a little while. But other than that, I guess that'll be it from me. And anything from you, honey?
I just think American Horror Story, if they were to stop American Horror Story, there's a lot of spin-offs that could come from the different characters that they haven't fully developed yet in this season. And maybe that's what throws people off from American Horror Story, is every season a topic, and it feels kind of unfinished sometimes with the way characters are portrayed, and you don't really find out all of the backstories of all of these characters. So I think that might be an interesting take for some, to see them further develop the characters and picking certain characters that were a highlight, like Twisty, and giving them their own little show may lead to more interest in the American stories.
Well, I guess we will see what the future holds. But thank you guys for taking the time to listen to us, and I'm pretty sure Steven might be coming on to let you guys know where to find us.
Thank you, Les. Well, Ramblers, let us know what your favorite season of American Horror Story is on Twitter at horrorramblings. If you've got more to say and a tweet's just not going to cut it, you can send us an email at horrorramblings@gmail.com. If you want to discuss horror with like-minded individuals, join our Facebook group or join us in our Ramblers room on Discord. You can even find us on Instagram to see an assortment of horror images. And if you're feeling generous and want to support the show financially, head on over to patreon.com/pencil-and-paper-productions. Help the show grow by leaving a review on your favorite podcasting app, and tell your friends to find us on their favorite platform as well. If you happen to be using Spotify, you can take a look at our weekly questions and polls and let us know what you think. Finally, if you prefer a central hub, you can keep up with any and all things at pencilpaperproductions.com/horror-ramblings. Links are in the show notes for your convenience. And remember, stay spooky out there.
This has been the Horror Ramblings Podcast. Join us next time for even more.
This has been a Pencil and Paper Podcast Network production.